Welcome to the Unlearning Room, a space to pause, get curious, and question what we've been taught. I'm your host, Mary Cat, though some of you may know me as Cecily May. Over the last few episodes, we've explored blame, how it hijacks safety, and we've walked through the care method as a way to shift from defense to connection. Today, we're taking that work one step further. We're unlearning criticism, that moment when frustration slips into a character attack, and how to replace it with clear complaints that move a relationship forward. We'll also talk about what to do when you do use a soft startup, but the other person's nervous system still hears attack and the conversation starts to spiral. Because here's the thing. Many of us were raised in homes where complaints were met with shame, dismissiveness, or punishment. So when we grow up, our bodies hear any dissatisfaction, ours or someone else's, as danger. That's not moral failure, it's wiring. And wiring can be rewritten. So settle in, take a breath, and let's step into the room together. Let's pause and define what we're talking about, because a lot of the pain and conflict comes from simple confusion. A complaint is about a situation. It's naming that something isn't working and inviting a path forward. It usually starts using I language and focuses on the behavior or circumstance. For example, when we run late for appointments, I feel anxious and rushed. I'd love if we could agree on a set time to leave. A criticism, on the other hand, shifts the spotlight from the issue to the person's worth or character. It comes in hot. You always, you never, if you had done this differently. And it lands like an attack. You're always making us late. You know how anxious that makes me. Same situation, but one invites collaboration while the other cues threat. And our nervous systems respond to threat fast. Heart rate spikes, breath shortens, shame floods in. Suddenly, it's not about leaving on time, it's about survival. This is where the blame reflex we've been talking about shows up. Blame is your system's attempt to stay safe and avoid our own felt sense of shame. It puts the responsibility of feeling good about ourselves onto the other person. But what actually keeps us safe in relationship is clarity, accountability, and repair, the heart of the care method. When you shift from criticism to complaint, you're signaling, I'm not attacking you. I'm naming what's hard and inviting change. It's a small but powerful nervous system cue. But what happens when you're trying to communicate clearly? Maybe you even start with a soft complaint. The other person gets defensive and turns it into a blame loop. That's where this next part of the work comes in. How to stay in connection when someone perceives your complaint as a criticism. I do want to note that the intention isn't to control the outcome or the other person, but rather to cultivate sturdiness in yourself in the face of rupture. There are 6 steps I tend to walk myself through when this happens, and they're all rooted in the same values we've been practicing through the care method: curiosity, accountability, repair, and empowerment. Step 1, pause for an internal check-in. Before you keep talking, check in with yourself. Notice what's happening in your body. Are your shoulders tight? Is your chest buzzing? That's your nervous system saying, I don't feel safe right now. Take a breath, maybe even name silently what's going on. I'm starting to feel defensive. I might even put my hand on my heart and remind myself of my current age. This softens any young parts in my system that might feel overwhelmed. If you're like me, then complaints might have meant you were in trouble as a child. Next, get curious. What's my actual need here? What's my intention in bringing this up? Accountability starts with you, not in a self-blaming way, but in an awareness way. Remember, blame keeps us honed in on who's right or wrong. Accountability allows us to take a step back, acknowledge both perspectives, while taking responsibility for our side, like our internal reactions and our perception. I want to note that repair is where reconnection comes from, though it's not always possible with the other person. You can only repair as effectively as the overall health and skill level of the relationship, which means that the level of repair can only match the level of the person with the lowest level of conflict resolution skills. Of course, I am a firm believer that we are all capable of growth if we're open to it. And if both parties are willing to walk the path of learning together, you can cultivate these skills within your relationship together. The next step would be acknowledge the pattern, which might look like a small noticing on your end if things start looping. Name it gently, either to yourself or to the other person. Something like, I notice we keep circling around this, and I don't think we're getting anywhere. Can we pause and try to get back to finding a solution? This can shift you out of defense versus defense and into a meta-level awareness, ideally two people noticing what's happening instead of being trapped inside of it. But even if it's just you're noticing, that's okay. You're bringing awareness to your own part, and that's huge. Step 3 is highlight common goals. Once the tension drops a bit, either in yourself or if the other person is also able to pause, remind both of you what you're actually working toward. We both want to feel heard and understood, or we both want to get better at leaving on time so mornings aren't so stressful. Shared goals unify us and rebuild safety. They remind your brains, oh right, we're on the same team. Step 4 is focus on resolution, not blame. It's tempting to restate your point louder or prove you're right, but that just reactivates the blame loop. Try questions instead. What can we do differently next time? What might make this feel easier for both of us? You're moving from who caused this to how can we prevent this? You're going from courtroom energy to teamwork energy. With step 5, you set boundaries if needed. If the other person's defensiveness escalates, it's okay to create space, which could sound like, I really want to work toward a solution, but I think we both need a break. Let's come back to this when we can both be open to the other person's perspective. Boundaries protect connection. They say, I care about this relationship enough not to let it spiral further. A nuance to this to remember is that if someone is naturally really guarded around conflict or complaints, they may also interpret boundaries as control or an attack. So I'll say it again. The intention isn't to control the outcome or prove anything to the other person. They are allowed to have their feelings just as you are. This is where self-validation and self-regulation are empowering tools to use. To remind ourselves that our worth or value is not tied in how others react, but rather it's how we show up for ourselves despite rupture in the relationship. The last step is step 6, and this can be the most challenging to encompass. Accept their level of skill. Sometimes no matter how gently you approach it, the other person just doesn't have the regulation or self-awareness to meet you where you are. That's not an invitation to collapse or overfunction. It's an invitation to extend yourself compassion with boundaries. You can still practice co-regulation through tone, breath, and calm phrasing, like, I can see this is frustrating for both of us. Let's figure out a way to handle it differently so we both feel heard. Or, my complaint is not meant to attack you, rather, it's a bid for connection. That's accountability meeting empathy, two skills that grow together. Yet we can't force someone else to utilize skills they might not have within their reach. It doesn't mean one person is better, but it can feel disappointing or depleting when there is an imbalance of conflict resolution skills between two people. There ends up being really two options. Either both people hunker down with a blame mindset and defenses up, which pushes people further apart either through escalation of the fight itself, or they both become so exhausted that one or both people surrender to appease. Neither result in repair, and instead of building emotional safety, it erodes it. The other option is for the person with higher levels of conflict resolution skills, self-awareness, and regulation tools to gently guide the relationship towards repair. This often requires more energy and emotional labor on the one offering more patience, which can result in resentment over time if the relationship doesn't shift towards more balance. This is the heaviness of relationships that is often not spoken about. Because you see, we learn whether conflict or complaints feel safe or unsafe to our nervous systems in childhood. And that blueprint shows up strong in adulthood unless we practice reflecting without shame overtaking our systems. This is what's underneath the phrase, the power of the pause. It's one's ability to reflect while regulating, to ground into your worth while staying open to hear feedback or another's perspective of the impact your words or your choices had on them. When you're in these moments, the kind where you've taken responsibility for your internal reactions, started soft, stayed calm, but the conversation still loops. It's easy to start turning frustration inward. What's wrong with me? Why do I always end up here? But the truth is, self-reflection only creates repair when it's rooted in safety. And for many of us, self-reflection once meant shame. When you slow down enough to notice your own patterns without attacking yourself for having them, you're already interrupting the cycle. So if you feel shame or overwhelm when you try to self-reflect, start small. Imagine a younger version of yourself sitting beside you. Take a deep, full belly breath and say, a part of me feels, and then fill in the blank. Notice what sensations are alive in your body. Name them gently, not to fix them, but to meet them. Swap self-judgment for curiosity and self-criticism for compassion. The goal isn't to be perfectly self-aware. It's to build a deeper understanding of yourself. That's how you begin to regulate in real time. And regulation is what allows you to show up for repair and to accept whether the other person is able to meet you in the middle or not. Because self-reflection is a ripple effect. When we practice it with ourselves, it softens how we respond to our partners, our friends, and our kids. This is one of the most powerful skills we can model as parents, showing our children what it looks like to hold frustration with understanding, not defensiveness. When we orient ourselves back to safety, feet on the ground, a hand on the heart, a reminder of our age, we're telling our bodies, I am safe enough to listen. That's where repair begins. Because unlearning criticism isn't just about how we talk to others, it's about how we talk to ourselves in the quiet after the conflict. And if you're a parent, this is gold to model at home. Because when your child complains, you never listen to me, or that's not fair, it's rarely an attack. It's a bid for connection. Our job isn't to shut it down, but to hear the need under the noise. You're telling me something doesn't feel good for you. Let's figure this out together. This reminds me of a story from when I was in elementary school, when family life was full-blown chaos and my mom would be yelling and dishing out punishments and threats at me. I would often yell back that I wished my dog Rusty was my mom. Now, the story my parents retold all the way into my 20s was that I had hurt my mom with that comment, and she carried the pain from it. And yeah, I learned to use words as weapons during my youth. But what always stuck with me around that specific comment and wanting Rusty to be my mom was the underlying plea of wanting my actual mom to show up with the same safe and unconditional love that I received and felt from my dog. Because as a 6-year-old, the way I knew how to express that was by stating that I wanted my dog to be my mom. Had my mom paused with curiosity and regulated her own sense of self-worth and self-reflection, she probably would have been able to understand that I didn't feel emotionally safe or unconditionally loved with how she was showing up. The ability to not simply react and take what our kids say as personal attacks, but rather deeper meanings to what their needs are, is how we teach our kids that conflict can be safe and that communication doesn't have to mean combat. And while we're here, I want to name something that comes up a lot, especially for those of us learning how to speak our needs for maybe the first time in our lives. For some of us, especially those who didn't feel like we had a voice growing up, complaints can become a kind of new power practice. Finally, being able to name what's not okay feels liberating, or responding in defensiveness to another's complaint can tip into domination mode, where we focus more on being right than hearing the other person's perspective. When we're trying to prove our point, rigidity takes over. True empowerment allows space for both truths, yours and theirs. A complaint isn't a battle for right or wrong, it's a bid for connection. But for many of us, those bids can still trigger our nervous system's old memories. Moments when a disapproving adult scolded or shamed us for speaking up. Shame rises, defenses take over, and before we know it, the present-day person expressing a need is being blamed for someone else feeling small. That's why self-awareness matters so much here. You can name your experience without making the other person the villain, and that's how relationships start to heal. Because that's really what this episode is about. Unlearning the reflex to defend, attack, or dominate when what we actually want is to be understood and unconditionally accepted. Unlearning criticism isn't about never feeling frustrated. It's about learning to notice what part of us shows up when we feel unseen. The child who wasn't heard, the fixer who wants harmony, the protector who's just trying not to feel small or misunderstood again. The more awareness we bring to those parts, the less power they need to take over the other person or the conversation. So the next time you feel that urge to prove your point or to get through to someone who's not hearing you, pause and ask yourself, is this about connection or correction? If it's correction, take a breath. You can always circle back later when regulation has returned. Let's take a breath and check in. Think back to a moment this week when you felt unheard. How did your body respond? Did you freeze, fawn, push harder, or shut down? What might it look like to approach that same moment again through curiosity instead of criticism, through complaint, not contempt? Remember, unlearning isn't about perfect communication. It's about honest repair, which requires offering yourself and the other person some positive regard. Otherwise, it's easy to form a negative bias and see them as the villain. Every time you choose curiosity over control, you're retraining your nervous system to believe that conflict can be safe and that connection doesn't require sameness. And if you're feeling open to it, here are 3 reframes to take with you today. Our interpretation of day-to-day experiences is influenced by the state of our nervous system. Being able to take responsibility for your own feelings when someone's words or actions activate your nervous system takes knowing how to navigate shame and dysregulation. And lastly, complaints are bids for connection. Let them land where they need to. Maybe one sticks, maybe all 3 do, or maybe they just soften something that's been feeling sharp. Thanks for stepping into the Unlearning Room with me. If something stirred in you today, titrate it slowly or bring it into conversation. That's where the unlearning begins. New episodes drop weekly-ish on Thursdays. You can find me on Instagram at the Unlearning Room Podcast or visit cecilymay.com. Until next time, stay curious. Stay kind to the parts of you still learning.